upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it.
Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio!
Down the Russian glen, we're not go hunting for fear of little men. You see, nobody ever goes in. Nobody ever comes out.
We know where you are at all times. That's our business.
All right, welcome to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where you don't need to expect us. We're already here. And now it is time for Firing Lines with Douglas Dietrich. So call in 347-688-2902. That is 347-688-2902 and discuss what you would like to discuss with Mr. Douglas Dietrich. freedomslips.com, Revolution Radio, weaponized talk radio.
Okay, and welcome to the Saturday Night Firing Lines. Very happy to be here with all of you. It's the confluence of a number of anniversarial events, some of them quite happy and some of them quite tragic. And we're certainly here tonight so that I can basically talk about them. And because of that reason, we probably won't be taking calls tonight. People are still getting used to the idea that I'm starting to take calls again. I do want the word to go out that Douglas Dietrich is taking calls on Saturday nights. However, questions have been asked that require a lot of exposition, and I'll go into them starting now. Two major questions were asked about the illustrations, and these were asked by Kerry Sekvier. A shout out to him. And we had some questions asked by a lovely lady. I'm not quite sure if her name matters or that she wants it brought out, but she asked me about why I'm staying in San Francisco and why wouldn't I move to get out of the area. So these are certainly questions that many people ask constantly, and I'll be happy to articulate on them tonight. I'd want to give a shout out, of course, to Laura Lee Solomon, my Executrix producer, for all the work that she does to keep us on the air. And of course, hopefully things are going well with our co-producer halfway across the Pacific, Judith Ager, who usually used to give us some quality control feedback on our sound, and hopefully we're still getting that from down under in the land of Oz, from John O'Callaghan, and of course in New Zealand from Devlin Adam Morris. So we've got a relay circuit going around in the largest surface area of the world across the Pacific Ocean within the English-speaking nations, and I hope that everything sounds good to you as well. It seems to be coming back as positive feedback, so I'll proceed. Now, in terms of the question as was presented to myself with San Francisco, a woman asked me fairly naively and innocently exactly why I would stay in San Francisco, and more than that, specifically in area of Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino, who lives literally within walking distance of myself. And he is, of course, on Russian Hill with myself for all intents and purposes. The difference is that we're on different streets. I'm on Green Street and he is on Leavenworth Street. His address, of course, is no secret, and nor is the fact that it was raided by Inspector Pamphloff of the San Francisco Police Department many years ago during my leakage of the child daycare center scandal and everything that was going on with it. And that kind of breaches right into the illustrative aspect. Someone was kind enough to bring to my attention, Kerry Sekviar, the fact that he had seen one of my my illustrations, and he had seen it on somebody else's page or out there on the internet. He was bringing it to my attention in case of copyright violation. And I do want to assure everyone, when it comes to quote unquote copyright violation, we are far more concerned about the Steve Outrim phenomena, where we have somebody who is literally attempting to rebrand the information which I have leaked at the cost of the lives of the majority of people around me. All of my immediate family and many of my loved ones have literally died as a result of my leaking this kind of information. It is a neutral thing in and of itself, as is the subject of history. History is public property. It's public domain. It's not the information that I shut down people like Stephen Outrim for on the internet. The reason that I shut him down on YouTube as copyright violation is because he was literally doing so in an attempt to steal my life, my persona, my entire essence of being. We're talking about a James Bond villain who wants to be James Bond. Basically, as you see with the archetypal clash of stereotypes within a James Bond franchise, you have basically a lone agent, a lone factor, a lone element who is going up against a sinister organization. The organization, of course, is usually in the center of the web. We have an incredibly wealthy individual. Usually the stereotype, of course, is antithesis to my situation. The stereotype of James Bond, because they're trying to promote and propagandize the power of the state, the lone agent is on the side of the state, your state, specifically in the case of that franchise, the British Empire. So we have an agent of the British Empire who's supposed to represent all that is, if not good, about the British Empire, because he's hardly presented as a good boy. He's no Boy Scout. What's presented is all that's glamorous and all that's sexy and all that's hip and hot and attractive, that can be funneled into reflecting upon the British Empire as something that is keeping up with the times. The villain, on the other hand, is always a rogue element, a rogue agent who has somehow amassed an enormous amount of resources and threatens the stability of the concert of nations, or the nation state, in essence trying to create a empire that is usually worldwide. It's usually a world conquest kind of thematic that is presented on the part of the James Bond villain. And the James Bond villain is, of course, therefore going up against the state, and therefore the rogue element is sent in to penetrate his organization and theoretically break it wide open so that the state can come in and clean up the mess. So basically a mop-up job operation is what you usually see at the end of James Bond films, whether it's Thunderball or You Only Live Twice. These are the classic franchise films I remember. I haven't seen any of the newer ones, to be quite honest, so I don't know if that stereotype or that plot line has changed. But it's basically like Star Wars, a remake of the same movie over and over again. So just as you had I believe it was The Empire Strikes Back or The Revenge of the Jedi, whichever one had the Ewoks in it, was entirely a remake of the original Star Wars, complete to the destruction of a Death Star. And in this case, you didn't even have a fully functional Death Star. That's how lame that was. And as far as I'm concerned, the franchise died right then and there. So in the case of the James Bond films, what I'm experiencing, of course, as a public informant, as a rogue element, is entirely the antithesis of that kind of stereotype. I'm not someone who is dispatched by the government to take out a rogue element that, say, someone like Stephen Outrim fantasizes himself to be. Quite the opposite. Stephen Outrim is in San Francisco and lives in the city and county of San Francisco because he can afford to live here. He is quite wealthy. He's a multimillionaire. He got that way on your tax dollars by being a defense contractor. All of Silicon Valley started off with defense contracts. So this incredibly wealthy individual, and to give you some perspective on San Francisco and these Silicon Valley snake oil salesmen, the entire purpose of intelligence, or what we would call that. They would call it that in the military. In the civilian world, you'd call it information distribution businesses. Information distribution businesses have no reason to be in San Francisco. The entire idea of the internet is telecommuting. You are supposed to be able to telecommute to work from wherever you're at. You could be living in the polar north or on the Antarctic continent. And no matter where you are living, you should be able to teleport to virtually attend meetings, no matter where you are in the world. Timbuktu, Nigeria, Ethiopia, anywhere in the world, you should be able to teleconference and be there instantaneously. That's the whole myth of the internet. So with all of that in mind, the whole idea of a truly functional internet business system would be an internet business that would set up in the cheapest possible place in Tijuana, Mexico, or something like that, and then actually turn their local community into a thriving economy by creating jobs by telecommuting. Now, none of that has ever happened. Everybody who's in the Silicon Valley snake oil world has their headquarters in San Francisco. Now, I had a friend of mine who's he was this gay guy. He was a dean of counseling for financial aid at the California College of Podiatric Medicine. And there were only two podiatry universities in all of the United States, one on the East Coast and one on the left coast. And the one on the left coast was suffering all kinds of problems. Ultimately, it had to shut down, lost its accreditation, reopened, got its accreditation back. It was going through all kinds of crisis. He ultimately moved on to become a financial aid counselor at UC Berkeley. He had a brother. His brother worked in nuclear submarines in the past. And after his brother retired from the Navy, became involved with information systems. This is not at all surprising. All of this starts from defense contracting. Anybody who's really advancing, it's just like, for instance, civilian airline pilots. Classically, all civilian airline pilots in general got their training in the military. There's almost no one who is going to get that level of training with that heavy equipment for flying a 747 outside of the military. You're flying a jet in the military. You're under high pressure, you're under high stress. You're trained to a great degree, and these are the kinds of people who ultimately usually became civilian airline pilots. Now, of course, things have changed. We don't have that level of war or conflict at the intensity that we had through the Vietnam era. So I'm certain that there is a new system for recruiting civilian airline pilots. But whatever it is, I'm unaware of it. Back in the day until very recently, the overwhelming majority of civilian airline pilots that you would run into had military experience. Well, that's the way it is in the information systems world. Many people who are in information systems have either contracted with the government, which would be Department of Defense, which would have most need for their services, or at one time were literally in the military. So we had this guy who used to be in nuclear submarines, the brother of this friend of mine, and he was working for a information systems distribution network or a software company, something of that nature. And he kept telling them, why don't you move out of San Francisco? All of our profits, all of our money, everything that we generate is going back into paying rent for overhead to maintain this stupid office in San Francisco where the rent is beyond astronomical. This is why San Francisco is unlivable for the overwhelming majority of people on Earth. It is literally, depending on what year it is, real estate conditions, it is literally often the most expensive city in the world to live in, beating out the islands of Hawaii, beating out Tokyo, London, or New York City, which are the three major world cities on Earth. And it's far more expensive to live in San Francisco than any of those places the majority of the time. And so, of course, he was told, oh, we have to have a San Francisco address. The San Francisco address shows that we are a happening company, shows that we are a company that is a part of this whole phenomenon of supposed growth in Silicon Valley. And it's all a fraud. It's all a sham. It's all a facade. Silicon Valley is, in a very real sense, very much a rust belt. So you've got this whole situation where to put up that front, people are fronted. So in this case, you've got this defense contractor, Stephen Outram, who tried to steal my life, and he was a multimillionaire. But as the James Bond villain, he is in the government's hoc. He is the person who is working for the government. I, as the lone element, the public informant, am totally alienated from the government. I have no connections to them now. So as a result, you have a true rogue element who is going up against a James Bond villain who has the whole state and society behind him. So that is the difference between Steve Outram and myself. But the pathology comes in where he wanted my life. He stole my nom de guerre, my name of war. He stole my nom de plume, my pen name, instead of referring to himself as the renegade military historian. He called himself the shadow historian instead of referring to himself as the most dangerous man either side of the Pacific. He basically called himself as the guy from the other side of the Pacific because, like myself, he is a foreigner. He is foreign born. He's not he was a United States citizen only by condition of his becoming a wealthy defense contractor. So as a result, you've got somebody who is as foreign to you as I am, but the difference is he's white and English is his first language as a New Zealander. So you're supposed to trust him more. And so in terms of the calling himself all of these names that are based on my own persona, my own reputation, which I developed, we have an individual who is basically trying to steal me and therefore present all of the information I present from the government perspective. They can no longer deny anything that I've leaked or exposed over all these years, so they have to co-opt it. So that was the whole Steve Outram supervillain, James Bond villain assignment, was to co-opt everything I've exposed, reformat it, and rebrand it. As I said, this is called trumping. Trump does this. Trump is, for instance, someone who has indeed been bankrupt 4 times in his career. And he has continually rebranded himself as wealthy again by declaring bankruptcy on his various businesses or enterprises so that he can leapfrog ahead of his creditors. So if he were president of the United States, what would be his strategy to deal with our economic depression? And let's not use the term recession. Let's use the term depression. His strategy would probably be to repudiate the national debt. And that, of course, would collapse the world economy. And basically, it would force an invasion by the Asian powers, who we owe all of the debt to, Japan, Korea, Communist China, to invade, to collect on the debt. That's essentially what he would bring about, theoretically, if he were in charge of the economy, following the business model he's followed so far. Now, the funny thing about Americans is they think that this level of criminality, of basically leapfrogging ahead of your creditors by declaring bankruptcy on corporations, they think that that's financially brilliant. They think that that's fiscally a model to follow. Okay, that is not a model which one can sustain an economy on. Repudiation of the national debt would, of course, collapse the economy, force a foreign invasion for collection. And if they could not afford to come over because they were dealing with their own problems because of their collapse of their own economies on the basis of his repudiation of the national debt, where does that leave you anyway? Does that leave you in a position to mobilize to invade them? Hardly. So there's not much good that can come out from following the Trump model. But the Trump model is based on rebranding. By constantly leaping ahead of his creditors, he rebrands himself as wealthy again and again and again. So we've got this model of this other guy, Stephen Outram, who decides he's going to call himself, this rogue element, this shadow historian, take all of my information, regurgitate it verbatim, but somehow you're supposed to believe it because it's coming from him. And I've exposed last time how I was, of course, leaking information throughout the period of time I was with the Department of Defense, which, as a liar and a fraud, he claimed I did not. And the majority of everything that you know of today in your alternative information distribution circles that you spout off again and again and constantly reference to, such as Operation Paperclip. I regret the day I ever released information on Operation Paperclip. And then it got taken up by the X-Files. That's where you first heard about it from, was in popular culture, was, of course, through the X-Files. Now, all of this was at the same time Dr. Richard Allen Miller, who I've met personally, who I've been in Australia with. Okay, Dr. Richard Allen Miller was the man who was the consultant to Chris Carter for the X-Files. Okay, all of this is verifiable. All of this is vettable. What did Dr. Richard Allen Miller get that from? Myself. in many ways. He was a technician. He was not working with information destruction or documents destruction. Okay, every one of you takes Operation Paperclip now, and you use this to support a psychotic delusion that the National Socialists are running your government. Okay, it had nothing to do with that. The information I released has been so warped and mutated that it has turned into a pathological derangement that has nothing to do with the reality of the information itself, which was an observation program for the Third Reich in exile on the nation states of the United States and the Soviet Empire, and to a very, very small extent, the UK. So minimal as to be almost nil. So we have a situation in which when I released this information, how did I do it? Anonymously through the Government Accountability Project, the GAP. Now, it's interesting to me that Steve Outram, when he claims all of this leaking of information, of course, which he is not doing because he can't make that claim, he's just basically saying that he is the new rogue element in terms of my various names that he's stealing. If you ever took a look at what he was saying, aside from the shadow historian and that he was keeping track of all of this various stuff, he never tells you, of course, where he gets his information, other than to say, oh, Douglas Dietrich says all this, but we can't listen to him or can't believe him. And he never says why. And but coming from him, you're supposed to believe it. And the end result is he can't say why, because he's basically working for the government. And he would basically say, we can't believe him because he's a rogue element who gave me all this information. That's all I'm regurgitating it from, was everything that was from Douglas Dietrich. Because, of course, we have the proof based on a screenshot, of course, which is the evidence that I put into the chat room before of his contacting Lori and Ann Fenton. And at that time, he was desperate to purchase all of my information, my presentations, and she could not sell them to him legally because I refused to give her my signature. So she was desperately trying to digitally forge my signature. Now, of course, this was never done. Very difficult to forge my signature digitally or any other way. I have a very flourishing signature. So she basically had to sell it to him under the table, which explains why she's still living where she's at as opposed to homeless in the highest per capita income area in the world, Marin County, in the greater San Francisco Bay Area, where her rent is well over $3,000 a month. And my rent, of course, otherwise I'd be a homeless veteran, due to rent control in San Francisco, because my parents were here for so many years, my rent is stabilized at increasing only incrementally by a few percentiles every year. And my rent is currently $785 a month. So I'm paying far less than what she's paying to live in Marin County. And yet she's got this source of income based on accounting for other people's or bookkeeping, which, of course, has maybe one client. And she has, as I've said before, never, ever paid a day of income taxes in her life. Now, I've said this publicly, and there's never been any repercussions, which shows, of course, she works with the government. That means she's a government asset because no one's ever audited her. She's never gone to jail for not paying income tax, even though it can be publicly verified or verified by the IRS that she's never done so, most certainly. No repercussions have ever been forthcoming. And that, of course, is because she is with them as an asset. That's been that case from the beginning. So it was one government asset giving the presentations that I had to another. Now, all of this couldn't be avoided. I had to work with her so that the government would think that I was under handling, that I was being monitored. And that is part of the reasons why I'm stuck in San Francisco, is so they could maintain the monitoring and then screw up every time they try to act on it, which would be very difficult for them to screw up on if I were in a more isolated area. So to put this in some perspective for you, you've got this like multimillionaire Stephen Outram. He decides that he's going to basically take over my life and present himself as a kind of new replacement for me. Now, none of this is very independent. All of this is under orders. But the reason he's here, of course, is because he's got to maintain the San Francisco mystique. Now, what kind of San Francisco mystique is there? It used to be the most literate area in the world. When it came to information circulation, there were more bookstores in San Francisco per square block than anywhere else in the world. You could go what we call booking. You could go from one bookstore to another, and just basically spend all day looking through different books, making new discoveries, finding things that you would want, and it became almost feverish. It was very much an addiction. I've spoken before of the young lady I knew named Tracy, and she was someone who ultimately died managing Lifetime Books in San Francisco, and she was someone who couldn't afford, of course, to pay for her own health care, and as a result, paid for it with her life because she had to keep her credit clean, so she couldn't go to a hospital, because even if she went to a general hospital, which is open even to the homeless, you will be billed. If so long as you have an address, you will be billed. So as a result, Tracy, whose name, I might find out her surname later. It's been so long. It's been so many years. I did my best to purge such negative memories from my mind. I can just have Laura Lee look up Tracy Lifetime Books, death and passing, and we can get her surname sometime later in the show. But certainly I'd like to give a thought out to her on the other side. But she was a victim of the lack of socialized medicine, and ultimately we had to usher in what Americans refer to as Obamacare because of that case. And that was part of living in San Francisco as well. Rent is astronomical for businesses, and there's no rent control for businesses. So you've got this whole thing where you've got this information center point back in the day with the bookstores. And of course, at the bookstores, you would meet all of the intellectuals who wrote many of the books. I myself, of course, have met John Michael Greer, who suffers from Asperger's syndrome, is very self-centered and egomaniacal, considers himself an archdruid. He wrote many excellent books on the phenomena of everything from ufology to, shall we say, the collapse of civilization. The Long Descent is a particular favorite of mine. And of course, he is someone who speaks of things as a person with Asperger's syndrome, from a very insulting tone, to the point where he was on Coast to Coast AM and he insulted all of the audience and their intelligences, and they had to get him off the air. There's an individual named Ingo Swann whose work was being spoken of by my own Executrix producer, and he, of course, came to San Francisco to speak in Fields Books. We used to have a bookstore in San Francisco that specialized in occult books, and this was, of course, a San Francisco landmark, kind of like a treasure house of San Francisco. Of course, it's closed now because they couldn't afford to maintain the overhead. A good friend of mine worked there for many years, Esther Fishman, and of course she was able to meet Ingo Swann, who came there to speak shortly before he died in 2013. And the bookstore closed around the time of my mother's death, or very shortly thereafter. So it closed around the time that Ingo Swann died in that year, 2013. And of course you have Jacques Vallée, who, of course, I've met him several times. I was photographed with him at that bookstore, and of course those photographs circulate throughout the internet. And Jacques Vallée, of course, has been mentioned by Mara Herman, a good friend of ours. He was someone who was far more comfortable, as you could see in those photographs, if you compare him in photographs where he's right next to Anton LaVey, and they're all chummy. He looks far more comfortable with Anton Szandor LaVey, the founder of the First Church of Satan, than he does with myself. And so he's an individual who, of course, has his own connections to the dark side of the world. We can only speculate as to why. I think it was simply because he liked the conversation of Anton Szandor LaVey. I'm more than willing to give him the doubt on that. Anton Szandor LaVey was a very charming and witty individual when he was not being cruel and outright, of course, monstrously evil. So that was the whole reason why he could get away with what he did. Now, in terms of Jacques Vallée, good conversation is hard to find. He probably enjoyed the stellar conversation and intellectual stimulation of Anton Szandor LaVey, but he was a person who, say, for instance, the lady from my main post office. The main post office in San Francisco is near my home. It's within walking distance. Nice woman works there named Audrey. Audrey used to go into Fields Bookstore all the time. She bitterly regretted never having met Jacques Vallée, and I was speaking to her in the post office the other day about Jacques Vallée, and right after we had spoken of him, he showed up the next day and she was able to speak to Jacques Vallée. Now, this is how all of these people interact in this, shall we say, very intense area of people who are intellectually involved with generating much of the information that you pick up on your internet trolling. So whatever you're picking up on, much about Druidism and the occult, ufology, from the rational and skeptical perspective, which is very interesting considering the fact that John Michael Greer is a Druid. He is also someone who is highly skeptical and does much to debunk and deconstruct. When you run across that, you're running across it on the internet as generated out of here. When you're running across Jacques Vallée, who has been famous and helped to create the paranormal wave back in the day of Close Encounters of the Third Kind and the sickening 70s, when we had, of course, all of these movie directors presenting the alien thematic to you, which has become so indelibly branded in your brain as where all good life comes from. Americans have a theology that is beneath satanic. They believe that when surveys are taken of younger Americans, the majority of younger Americans have no belief in God. They believe they were created by aliens. At the same time, they all believe in the afterlife because they all watch various paranormal shows on which people go ghost hunting, and they all spend a lot of time seeking out the spirits of the dead. So to an American, there's no creator other than the aliens who created them, but somehow they're all generating ghosts and some afterlife kind of shadow of themselves in the ethereal. Okay, this is the insanity of an American. Now, all of that sources from out of here in San Francisco. Is that why I'm here? No, I'm not here for the intellectual stimulation. To me, there is very little to be intellectually stimulated by when I'm dealing with so many other issues. So people will use this. Again, the lame ass connection that always comes out, say, from people who are working with Stephen Outram, like Alex Merklinger. Alex Merklinger he was a con man. He used to run a radio show called The Mysteries of the Mind. He's about 76 years old right now. And what happened was that he was convicted for basically selling Pearl Harbor to the United States Navy. They later on found out they already owned it. Now, of course, nobody in their right mind would ever try to scam the United States Navy in such a fashion unless they had protection, unless they believed they were somehow untouchable. And so the reason Alex Merklinger had the balls or the audacity to sell Pearl Harbor to the United States Navy for $39 million, which of course he was ultimately caught for, he was ultimately convicted for, and as a con man, he wound up basically doing some time, but then being released. He now has, of course, a Facebook page of his own and is trying to develop a following. And he is an individual who is basically now attacking myself. And his biggest attack against me that he has is to say that I live next to Michael Aquino. So this is how stupid all of these people are. As you can see, I live next to John Michael Greer. I live next to Jacques Vallée. I live next to any other of these individuals that you can think of who are definitely part of the schematic of information which you troll for on the internet. And as a result, you have this ability to try and throw it back at me by saying that I'm here because somehow I'm controlled by these elements, which is beyond absurd. So when we've got that whole scenario of Silicon Valley, where the James Bond villain, who is actually on the side of the state and the government, as opposed to the rogue element, myself, which is not, tries to steal my life by calling himself Silicon Valley's secret weapon, and then follows up with an attack by Alex Merklinger, who is now online, basically trying to say that he's going to expose me under his new nickname, which is Arbeck 3200 TB40, RBECK 3200 TB40. All the letters are in the lowercase. This idiot is basically hitting you with the most ridiculous anti-logic that can be imagined, which is basically that I live in area of someone whom I despise. Now, here's the difference with San Francisco. I've exposed how small the area is. how congested it is. I've talked about how all the cabs basically don't want to pick people up because there's no benefit or profit in their doing so. As soon as you get in a cab and you reach another area in San Francisco, they make so little money off of taking you there that they've developed some kind of underground economy of their own where they're not picking people up. So when you have a situation like that in San Francisco where we're all congested, the only one thing I can say about it is that that's the primary advantage for a public informant like myself. And that brings us into all of the anniversaries that have congealed. When you've got an idiot like Stephen Outram, who calls himself Silicon Valley's secret weapon, which is a direct ripoff of my calling myself the human weapon of mass instruction, when he's trying to steal my entire persona to market all of the information that I've leaked as a rebrand underneath the government, when he's trying to trumpet to leap ahead of the creditors, so to speak, to leap ahead of you, because the government owes you. You pay all these taxes. You get nothing in return for these taxes that they tell you you're getting. National defense, everything goes into national security. What are you getting out of national security? You are getting no protection whatsoever from massive waves of immigration, from cab drivers, as I described, who are utterly foreign in terms of their paradigms and interest to yourself, and oftentimes abuse yourselves by assault or rape, as I've mentioned, has happened in San Francisco. The case that I brought up, for instance, to give you an example of this, June Christine Day was the victim of Jihad Bakla. Jihad was spelled Jehad, the way they phoneticized it in the American for his Arabic name. Bakla, of course, he was not ethnically Arabic, it must be stated. He was actually Turkic from the Soviet Central Asiatic Republics, almost certainly, because he worked with Town Taxi, and that was their particular ethnic enclaved gang group that was Town Taxi in San Francisco. The reason I know so much about that case is because the last ride he gave before he killed Julie Christine Day was to George Joseph Dietrich, my late and sainted father. And George Joseph Dietrich had to testify when he was questioned that this man's behavior was extraordinarily erratic, very irrational, and highly dangerous. And that is why I knew so much about the case. That was ultimately one of the factors that led to Jihad Bakla being declared legally insane at the time that he killed June Christine Day. And that's why he's in an insane asylum instead of in prison. Now, that's why I know so much about that case, but there are many cases like that that we're never going to hear about. And the most terrifying thing about San Francisco is when you get inside of these cabs is you cannot unlock the door. I remember you used to be able to open the door while the cab was in movement. I remember that, and they've changed manufacturing of cars, of course. You're not supposed to be able to do that for safety reasons, but I could do that in a cab at any moment, and the reason they did that was for safety so that people could roll out in case of a crash. Now, in terms of what's happening today, and by the way, ironically, there was a cab driver once I got in the cab with, and he was talking about a horror film called The Bone Collector. He said, oh yeah, there was a movie I saw called The Bone Collector. There was a cab who had set up his doors where the passengers couldn't leave. He was able to lock them from the front, and therefore he was able to trap them in the cab and then kill them all. And he was a serial killer, and he was called The Bone Collector. And he would melt the flesh off their bones and collect their bones. Now, keep in mind, this is a cab driver telling this to a passenger he doesn't know. This is the level of cab driving you get in San Francisco. Obviously, that is considered by any vulnerable person, a senior or a female, to be a threat. Now, I myself, of course, could handle them easily, but it's one thing to know that you can exit a cab. Another thing, knowing you can't exit it and you're going to have to kill the driver. That's the situation you're stuck with in San Francisco. You cannot leave the cab because even when they park the cab, that door remains locked until they decide to unlock it. And that's so they can demand payment. That way you cannot leave without paying them. So keep in mind, when you are in a cab in San Francisco, you are literally trapped with a person who your life is in their hands. And that is the horror of living here. There are so many horrors of living here, but it's those some horrors that I use to my advantage. Another one of those horrors, of course, and we'll put a link to the album on Facebook into the chat room, is, of course, the rat girl phenomena. The rodent problem in San
Francisco is outrageous. The Rat Girl is a true supervillainess. There's an obsession with superheroes and supervillains in the United States and American culture. The qualifications of these individuals is that they're mutants, that they're made a human, that they're somehow able to do things a baseline human cannot do. If such is the case, then Rat Girl, Erica J, fits all of the criteria for being a supervillainess. Erica J is all that she's known as. Her surname has never been found out. She's protected under that name by the United States government. She goes from housing project to housing project because the government has promised to give her a home. Wherever she goes, she feeds rats. She reproduces rats. She breeds the rats. The rats, of course, infest the area, the entire city block, and make it unlivable. The rats attack seniors in their beds. They attack children in their cribs, and people have died. She has been responsible for any number of deaths. We don't know how many because the government hides it up. So she is part of no less than 24, 25, 27 different rat girls. They're all assigned a letter. Her letter is J, but she is known as the queen of the rat girls. She's done the most damage and she's killed the most people. Now, if this monstrous supervillainess were not in San Francisco, I never would have gotten out of the fix that I was in. That all came about in this confluence of anniversaries that we are speaking of. It is June 4th. This is the first week of the month of June. It is the first weekend of the month of June, and it brings back memories of 2014 and 2015. Now, way back in 2014, we had probably one of the most stressful periods of my life. It is when everything pretty much came to a head. It is for one of the reasons why I have suffered here as much as I have. Basically, what I had to do was still maintain my professional relationship with my former managers, Lorian Ann Fenton. She had organized what was the Super Soldier Summit for that year in the last weekend of May going into June. And so the Super Soldier Summit in 2014 was going from May 30th and 31st into June 1st. Now, I had to head down to Las Vegas at that time to attend the Super Soldier Summit. She had had 2 Super Soldier Summits before then. This was the last of them that was ever to happen. It was a Super Soldier / Mind Control Summit. She was starting to change the name and mutate it into a Mind Control Summit because the Super Soldier thematic doesn't work because everybody thinks of Captain America and Bucky the Winter Soldier and all the comic books. So in terms of all of this, however, she was beginning to gather an enormous number of people so that they could ultimately converge at these events that were names within the victim community. And because your average super soldier is a mind control victim, it has nothing to do with making them bigger and stronger. We're talking about people who have simply been manipulated all of their lives, waking up every morning, wondering where the hell they've been, very similar to a quote-unquote alien abductee, and potentially have been responsible for heinous deeds while they were out of it. These are people with multiple personalities, multiple realities, multiple timelines, and identities that they are trying to work with. And of course, in order to herd them, monitor them, people like Lorian Ann Fenton have been assigned. And Lorian Ann Fenton, of course, was gathering them into these various conferences. And at this year, it was pretty much slated they were all going to die. Now, a number of people who were there were, of course, people like Stephen D. Kelly, who was, of course, an admitted mind control victim. He delivered a presentation there that was witnessed by both Bill Grant, a great friend of Revolution Radio, and Noreen Helpand, who is herself a hostess of Revolution Radio on her own roundtable. And, of course, they witnessed Stephen D. Kelly deliver a presentation in which he admitted to having a handler from the Central Intelligence Agency agency and that he was a mind-controlled CIA asset. Now, of course, somebody who's being that open and verbal about what they're doing and who they are is a liability. He was to die with everyone else who was there. Of course, Eva Moore, who is the wife of a superb example of a controlled victim slash predator, Bill Brockbrader, who is a self-admitted child molester in court, to differentiate himself from a pedophile, which has a difference of age brackets, basically. He's an individual who, of course, was married by Eva Moore, who, of course, was at one point a hostess on Revolution Radio with Evolution was her program, and she was here with us affiliated at the time that, of course, the Super Soldier Summit was ongoing. She was also there. There were many people I could name that were down there in Las Vegas, and of course myself. Now, at the same time, Gerard and Mandy Miller had showed up, who had been at the Bundy Ranch. And of course, they were essentially in area, and the entire idea was that they were going to wipe us all out in a massacre under their own mind-controlled state. J-Rod, of course, had stated that his name was based on J-Rod, the alien that was supposed to have spoken to somebody who was interviewed by Linda Moulton Howe. So this was all based on various insider government code words, phrasings, all the rest of that. And while I was down there on June 1st through the 3rd, we had this incredible thing go down where my home was supposed to have been raided, and instead they got the other man. They got the neighbor next to me. And that's because whenever police raids occur at enormous levels of orchestration, there are any number of factors that go wrong. They're as nervous as you are. Just like if you've ever seen the movie Attack the Block. Attack the Block is about a British housing project, and it starts off in the opening scene with a bunch of young men mugging a woman. All kinds of bizarre incidents occur, which lead to their communication later on a far more equal basis of interaction, where the woman who was mugged confronts the fact that these people have violated her in the sense of that assault. And they were basically expressing to her that they were as nervous when they had done that as she had been while they were assaulting her. It's the same way with police raids. Believe it or not, they're as nervous as the people they take down. That's why so many accidents occur. That's why misraids occur all the time. Police will break into the wrong house and they will kill the wrong dog. They will basically swat down anybody in area, and they'll think they're taking out what's supposed to be a group of drug dealers, and it'll turn out it will be the family next door. There are incidents where, of course, police have been accompanied by reporters, and the journalists are filming so that they can present this to people later on. When those reporters are with the police, there was one incident that I know of where a man was shot, but not killed, by the police, and he swears up and down that if those reporters had not been there filming the police at that time, they would have killed him to have hid the evidence and basically shut him down so that he wouldn't have sued them and ultimately wound up the millionaire that he wound up. Now, this sort of thing, because it's so common, is what happened in my home area, Russian Hill of San Francisco. So while I was down at the Super Soldier Summit through the last weekend of May into June, and I stayed in Las Vegas for a while, I was indeed checking out the escorts. I was indeed sleeping in hotels. By the time I'd gotten back, I found that Russian Hill had been raided. They had set up a blockade all around Russian Hill. They had set up snipers on the roofs. They brought in the men with moon suits to work with hazardous materials. They were basically turning the place into what everyone thought was a movie scene. Because so many movies are filmed in San Francisco, they thought they were filming another Attack on the Rock or something stupid like that. And what they were doing was they were going to raid my home. And instead they hit Ryan Kelly Chamberlain II, a neighbor. And so when they hit this poor dude, they had to bust him on something. Now, he was not home, or he almost certainly would have been killed. And because he was not home, he was out on a bender. These guys wound up declaring a manhunt, because once they do something like that, they've got to ride with it. They've got to roll with it, because this wasn't just municipal. This wasn't state. This was federal. And so when they busted into his home, they had to start bringing in the men's moon suits like they did, stripping it of everything. And when they stripped it of everything, they took all this stuff out, and they had to say, well, we've got to get him on something. He's creating weapons of mass destruction. So they found out he had what they called rosary peas, or some kind of bean. My executive producer will put it into the slot box for me. But basically, it's something that theoretically, if he wanted to, he could process it at industrial levels and kill hundreds of people if he took these rosary peas and made them into a poisonous substance. He is still in the court system. He is in the court system even today, where he's had hearings and trials about ordering these weapons of mass destruction elements, like these rosary peas, online. So that's so he could plant them in his garden. So this poor son of a bitch was out drinking, and they found him finally on June 2nd. They declared a national manhunt. We're looking all over for this guy. Supposedly this weapons of mass destruction expert, brewing all of this stuff. He was well known in public relations circles. He was a public relations man, a PR guy. And then on the 3rd, they found him at a bar, the Barking Frog, where they took him down. And he was wondering who the hell is what, and where everything went wrong. And he's still wondering that to this day. So you've got that going down, and that was supposed to be me. All of that was supposed to happen while I was down in Las Vegas. My home was supposed to be raided. They would know I wasn't there. They would claim they found any number of things that were indicative of such potential abuse. And then I would have been basically brought on to trial. Now, that's if I survived. Theoretically, I shouldn't have been brought on to trial, because I would have died in Las Vegas, because Gerard and Mandy Miller would have showed up and tore apart the whole Super Soldier Summit. But because they were confused, because they were deflected, because a different, shall we say, phrase was able to turn them, they wound up attacking the next weekend, on Sunday, the 8th of June of that year, 2 cops in a donut shop or a pizzeria where they knew they could always find cops. And so they killed 2 LVPD. Those are the only people they killed, because when they went up to what they claimed was a Target or a shopping mall, the only other guy who got killed was killed by LVPD, Las Vegas Police Department, because he was a concealed carry dude. He was dumb enough to pull out his weapon when the Gerard and Mandy Miller told everyone to leave, waved everyone out, and then proceeded to kill themselves. He was standing like an idiot with his gun out, and LVPD came in and blew his ass away. So in terms of the rosary peas, they are Abris prectorius, known commonly as Jequirity. This is essentially what, this is the claim that the federal government has against Ryan Kelly Chamberlain II. So there and he tried to order them online, if you can imagine someone sinister enough to do so. And so in terms of my being able to deflect a massacre that was intended, that did an enormous amount of damage to the career of Michael Aquino, since he is now the deputy director of the National Security Agency. A huge amount of troublemakers that were there at the Super Soldier Summit of 2014 were not killed. Douglas Dietrich wasn't exposed as a kind of scheming, chef working with culinary, shall we say, menaces. And then we have a situation that should have been the perfect operation, go down by the dots like the Bay of Effin' Pigs in Cuba, where it is the perfect failure, where everything went wrong. So that's why, of course, Deputy Director for the National Security Agency, Michael Aquino, is back to pushing books out on the market and publishing books even in the year 2016 to kind of back himself up as he eases more and more into a retirement that is more actual than purported. And if it weren't for everything that was done at that incredibly stressful period of time within the only area it could be done, he would still be far more active and threatening to all of you and the rest of the world today. Now, in terms of everything that made it possible in San Francisco, we have a crowded city. It's a congested city. If I lived in any other area of the world other than, say, for instance, New York City, or a few other highly congested urban areas where there's an enormous amount of business and traffic and media attention, it would be impossible for me to be alive today. I would be dead. If I were living, say, for instance, the lifestyle of the individual who exposed Alex Jones in the first place as someone who betrayed him and someone who essentially had tried to and ultimately did frame him and finger him and got him killed, is say if I were Bill Cooper, William Cooper, living the William Cooper lifestyle out in the countryside. That's when you're confronted by a couple of paid off sheriffs who blow your ass away and say that you were reacting violently and responding irrationally, and they get away with it every time because they're the ones writing the reports. So you've got this whole situation where I have to be in a highly congested area where everything is visible. That's why I make myself as visible as possible. And not only that, if I were living alone in a suburban area, they would be able to isolate me, pick out the right home, and take me out just like that. And there's nothing anyone could do about it. Neighbors who are separated even by backyards, they may as well be on different planets. But when you're in an area where people are literally living one on top of the other, then when they put Russian Hill under the raid, they had to impact everybody who was living in these buildings that surround me, that when they basically began to strip down the residence of Ryan Kelly Chamberlain II. Once they had stripped it down, then they figured they hadn't raided the right home. Let's set up a bunch of surveillance equipment. Let's set up a bunch of emission equipment. All of this was set up basically right next door. And the only way I was able to get rid of them was to call on Erica J. And when I was able to pay her off, she sent in the rats. And I could hear the government pukes screaming every night when they woke up from their naps with rats chewing on their earlobes. It was the funniest thing in the world. Finally, I reported them to the Department of Human Services of San Francisco, which evicted them as creating a health hazard for everyone in the neighborhood. So at that point, the government cleared out, and whatever operation had been set in motion to microwave me to death, perhaps, or at least surveillance me to the point where they knew when I was basically secreting sweat from my glands or whatnot, was basically wiped out with it in terms of their ability to operate. So the home is safely rented out now to other people, and I'm back in a much more stabilized neighborhood situation. It's one of the reasons why I'm here. Stay with us and we'll be back.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
This is the People's War. is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it.
Right! You tell them I'm coming! And hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio! The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Okay, want to remind people that Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com is the largest listener-supported station on the internet. The key word here is listener-supported. It is yourself, the listener, that keeps us on the air. It's nearly the end of May, and it is the end of May. We are in June, and it's time to show up and help us pay the bills at $2,600 a month, still far less than San Francisco rent. It still breaks us in Louisville, Kentucky, which, of course, is where Muhammad Ali has recently passed away, and that is where Mike Ringley, the owner, proprietor of Revolution Radio, resides. That is, of course, quite a bit of money that it takes to keep him on the air for that part of the world. So stop by our website at freedomslips.com and click on the support tab to view some of the many fine options we offer you for you to express your support with. Also, subscribe to the Freedom's Lips Radio archives at less than $5 a month, $4.95 to be precise. Sign up at the bottom of the archives page, and we also have available the 2014 and 2015 archive DVDs. Check out the DVD sales page at www.freedomslips.com/season 2014 to get an entire year of your favorite show on DVD format delivered straight to your door. This is an entire year's worth of transmissions with every guest and every caller as close as your DVD player. Simply select your favorite show from the 2014 or 2015 broadcast year from the drop-down list and click Buy Now to check it out with PayPal, and your favorite show on DVD will be en route for only $34.95 within the continental United States, $39.95 outside of the continental U.S. Now, email the Nighthawk at freedomslips.com. That's the email address for Mike Ringley, Nighthawk at freedomslips.com. Email him your PayPal receipt, your show choices, your physical mailing address. This is a physical object. We're going to need that, or a P.O. box if you wish to maintain anonymity. And if you buy 5 or more DVDs, you get a free 1-year pass to the freedomslips.com archives, which is worth the convenience, even at a fairly astronomical price, because you don't need to bother with resubbing once a month, even though it's less than $5 a month to do so. I always recommend, of course, the 6-pack, which is Critical Omissions and Saturday Night Firing Lines for the transmission years of 2015, 2014, and 2013. You would email that to Nighthawk at freedomslips.com along with a PayPal receipt
and your physical mailing address or P.O. box. Now, of course, we have our own DVDs available for myself. I do recommend that people purchase them, of course. My own DVD presentations are Satan's Crusaders, and I have 2 separate versions of Roswell and the Rising Sun. One of them, of course, was delivered at UFOCon 2012 or something like that. That is the one that Richard Dick Dolan, the bottom boy for Michael Aquino, walked out on because, of course, he was instructed to do so by his master. And he is, of course, very much pushed and promoted aggressively by Michael Aquino, who claims to be a member of the secret space program, trademarked. And that, of course, is what he claims is run by or was participated in by himself and his co-religionist, Colonel John Alexander, and they promote it through Richard Dolan. And so if you want to see that presentation that Disfo Dick Dolan walked out on, it's available along with the other original Roswell and Rising Sun, which led to the death of my late and sainted mother, as well as Satan's Crusaders, 3 separate DVDs, $30 each, or they're available in downloadable format for $15 each, or both formats for the same presentation at $40. See my new website at www.dddietrich.com. You would PayPal to lsolomon1 at rgv.rr.com. I'll spell that for you. LSOLOMON numeric 1 at symbol RGV for Rio Grande Valley .rr for roadrunnerservice.com. Specify the email address where we can send you your links and your choice of presentation. No additional shipping charges apply in the continental United States for the DVDs, but please remember that, like Revolution Radio itself, we do not have an automated download system. Your email must be seen and responded to by a living, breathing person, so you need to allow, at the absolute minimum, half a day, at least 12 hours, for that happy event to take place. Now, my website, where you would find these, www.dddietrich.com, is managed by our web mistress, Mona Lee McRae, a regular contributor and Oregonian correspondent with the Firing Lines and Critical Omissions. That's the same state of Oregon where our would-be sponsor, Amanda Ute, lives and has been going through all of her problems. And, of course, the music of Mona Lee McRae herself is always top 10 on Reverb Nation's regional charts. Stop by her YouTube channel at the Monahawk. Visit her website at www.monalee.com. I'll spell that for you, www.monalee.com, where you can purchase some of her music. Amanda, of course, is still stranded up there for reasons that are very similar to mine. Amanda Ute is stranded in Oregon because she has a business. As an entrepreneur who is using this business to support her children as a single mother, she is stuck with Pacific West Bamboo, being very much literally rooted into the ground. So check out Pacific West Bamboo, and also check out Amanda Ute. She is someone who, if she moved, would have to take a 3-year hit on income because she would have to find acreage on which to reestablish her bamboo grove. By the time that it grew again, it would take 3 years before it reached productive levels for trade, and by that time, both she and her children would have starved to death, not to mention the menagerie of pets that they own. Now, say, for instance, they got rid of the pets heartlessly and maintained the dog Kronk for security purposes and moved. She still has a senior father in area who is ultimately going to need to integrate into family care. So all of this is what ties her to an area that she would very much want to be out of. That is a situation very similar to mine, though mine is far more invisible in terms of its anchorage and tether than hers. So make certain you contact Providence Insurance Company to maintain her alive so she can continue to take care of the children, her children, so that they don't ultimately wind up in Child Protective Services of the state of Oregon, where they would be instant Satan food. Providence Insurance is preventing her from getting the life-saving surgery that she needs. Resulted in an assassination attempt when she attempted to become my sponsor, gave all of her information that she should never have done so, but in her innocence did so to Lori and Ann Fenton, who promptly sold it to any number of pornography distributors. And ultimately, it was shortly after that her cell phone number was used to track her by geosynchronous satellite positioning, and she found herself and her children while on the road boxed in by 2 unidentified unidentified white trucks of identical make and model that ran her off the road. And it was only a series of miracles which left her children unscratched, their dog Kronk chewing through the safety belts, etc. In her case, she was not so lucky. She wound up with her internal organs very severely and violently rearranged. Her stomach is pushed well up into her diaphragm, and she requires surgery for this diaphragmatic hernia that will eventually kill her if she is not to receive this. A medical care team of 10 MDs, medical doctors, have said such. 4 of the surgeons involved with her surgery, should it be covered, have filed grievances against Providence Insurance Company, which refuses to cover it. So do call them at the following phone number to issue your protest against their refusal to cover her, and make it known that you understand it as an overt conspiracy to murder her, because they're obviously compromised by the intelligence agency of the National Security Agency, of which Michael Aquino is, of course, a deputy director. So we have, of course, a situation where you can help. Call 503 area code 574-7500. Once again, the phone number for Providence Insurance is 1-503-574-7500. They are, of course, located at 3601 Southwest Murray Boulevard in Beaverton, Oregon, zip code 97005. Also, if you will, contact Pat Garrett, the sheriff, if you wish, and let him know that you hope that a high-level patrol is, high-profile patrol is being conducted regularly near the properties of Amanda Ute. And, of course, their phone number for the See Something, Say Something is 1-503-629-0111. Other than that, we will move on forward to the situation with, say, for instance, the Tucson Murders True Crime Tours. These are guided by Ben Estenius, who's a personal sponsor of mine, who's quite secure in his ability to take care of himself as a single adult male of much experience. And he now guides the Tucson Murders True Crime Tours, which are historic crime investigations into forgotten lost crimes in Tucson, Arizona. Small private tours hosted by a true crime researcher and enthusiast that'll take you to real historic crime locations related to these crimes in Tucson, relive these events, and hear the untold stories behind the stories. This season, see the Pied Piper of Tucson tour. Crimes that shocked the Southwest in the 1960s. Devastating crimes that stained a city so deeply it may never be removed. For tour information, contact TucsonMurders.com. Remember that Tucson is spelled Tucson, Tucson, or phone Ben Estenius himself at the following number, 1-520/323-3406. Once again, that's 520 area code 323-3406. And we've got leather-shop.biz, which keeps the station afloat with regular payments. Visit www.leather-shop.biz, the same people who provide leathers for the Folsom Street Fair in San Francisco, where, of course, people march up and down the streets in head-to-toe leather gear, flogging each other in public flagellation in a fetishistic display of delight. For customized leatherwear, any style, any color, any size, any fetish, they love freedomslips.com, and your promotional code for a $250 discount on your order is lowercase dd 2016. In other words, my own lowercase initials along with this year's numeric designate. Once again, that promotional code for your $25 off on any customized leatherwear or gear is dd 2016. Sign up as well this year of 2016 for our time travel webinar experience produced sometime in 2015. Andrew Bartzies, Douglas Dietrich, Peter Moon, Laura Lee Solomon. These are 4 unique personalities that have offered their perspectives on time travel and magic to show how these 2 dynamic subjects have intertwined in the past, what role they might play in the future. You get to see me on video at my absolute worst. All of the participants break new ground in the course of this 4+ hour event. A webinar is valued at $37, but is available at the discount price to you, the listener of this transmission, for $27. As a bonus, you'll receive the introductory and first video of Peter Moon's new video series entitled Time Travel Theory Explained. So go ahead and visit www.galacticnewsnetwork.com for details. Once again, that's www.galacticnewsnetwork.com. And, of course, we have the Nighthawk situation, where he does want you to know he just got his degree in permaculture, horticulture, and sustainable gardening after an investment in 2 years of classes. So he's looking for investors or just some help so he can get these hoop houses set up. Now, talk about hoop dreams. Well, anything to escape from the chemtrails. But these are very practical architectural edifices that allow you to extend growing season through the winter. So let's get these hoop houses up and get things moving for his community. No, he's not starting a new doomsday cult. You might think that by some of the hosts and hostesses and what they say on Revolution Radio, but rather he's trying to bring in urban agriculture as part of the new paradigm, which is something all of us should support. He's also got his teaching degree in this field, so he could do videos, etc., in certified organic gardening and start teaching a bit of self-reliance beyond big box stores and stuff. So he's asking for investments or even loans so he can move forward. And he's always been about self-reliance. It was the reason he started the station, was to relearn the world on the old ways and less dependence on the technological grid as a total way of life. And so let's help him out there. And with that, I think that we've pretty much addressed everybody's needs for this particular evening. And I can go a bit into some details that people were sending in some emails and notes about. Basically, people were asking, rosary peas. Okay, these are not rosary beads, all right? This isn't strung on a necklace where our friend Ryan Kelly Chamberlain II was a Roman Catholic who was doing his penance. No, these are basically called jaquarity. They are similar to castor beans in the sense that the deadly toxins of ricin and abrine are contained in the seeds and can be extracted with industrial grade efforts. That is basically all they've got on this poor bastard, Ryan Kelly Chamberlain II. Now, in terms of J-Rod and Mandy Miller, J-Rod claimed that his name was a play on J-Rod provided to him by the government mind controllers that comes from Dan Burrish. Linda Moulton Howe interviewed a dude named Dan Burrish. His surname was spelled B-U-R ISH, and Dan Burrish claimed he met an alien called J capital hyphen Rod, as in he's just rodded all of you with a fish story. He's reeled you in with the rod and strung you all up. I actually met cab drivers in San Francisco who had changed their names to J Rod because they were inspired by this bullshit. And so that's some of the nonsense you're dealing with there. I mean, to give you an idea of the surrealism in San Francisco, we've spoken, of course, of the fact that I'm here, I'm stranded here. I've given you some reasons as to why Amanda Ute, who is online with us, big shout out to her. She's just hanging in and listening, but she is online. And Amanda Ute is stranded in Oregon for all the reasons I just articulated. My anchorage, as I said, is no less solid, but much more invisible. I deal, of course, in supporting myself. I have to maintain my life. And I'm doing this as a rogue element who, unlike Stephen Outram, the guy who's tried to push himself as Silicon Valley's secret weapon, stealing my nom de guerre as human weapon of mass instruction, tried to push himself as a shadow historian, stealing my nom de plume as, of course, the renegade military historian, the person who has tried to steal my life because I've got the one thing he can't have, that I'm a real man, and that I'm a guy who's done it all on my own without being fed on your tax dollars through defense contracts that made him literally all fat and juicy. Now, there are people out there who have suggested that he may have sent agents over to sabotage the steamer machine where my medical cosmetologist V was working on my rejuvenation treatments in order to sabotage my good looks as a way to even up the playing field so that people would start taking him in and what he's saying with his Burning Man rhetoric as opposed to myself. We can only speculate in those regards. He's got the money, of course, to do such things. We can't go in directions like that until there's further evidence. Suffice to say, somebody tried a real disfigurement attempt at myself by seriously sabotaging a steamer machine recently. That, of course, is an attempted assault. We have no idea what direction that's going to go in. I'm going to take it nowhere because it didn't take place, other than the fact that we were able to frustrate it. I very much am willing to take a blister on my finger as opposed to my face. Even if my face were missing, I'm still Douglas Dietrich, and I would have to rely at that point entirely on my brains, which would only make me far more dangerous a threat. So why these people do what they do is beyond me. In terms of what I do while I'm working here, using my brains when I'm dedicated to using them, is a cultural community. I am an Asian Pacific Islander American. I am somebody who works quite heavily with the Asian Pacific Islander American community. This is a community that is impossible to penetrate by the United States government. Back in the days of Jack London, he was responsible for the San Francisco patrol of the United States Coast Guard, in which they used to hunt down Chinese illegal fishermen. And he grew to hate the Chinese so much because there was no way to infiltrate their community that he advocated the extermination of Chinese on planet Earth. Literally did so in a short story called The Unparalleled Invasion, which ultimately was translated into Japanese, read by Emperor Hirohito, who realized that this man was advocating what would become an official stated objective of the United States. Emperor Hirohito was reinforced and vindicated and validated in this suspicion by the American development of the hemagglutinin 1 neuraminidase 1 H1N1 virus, the original avian swine flu virus, which was unleashed on Europe and killed 100 million people worldwide. This is what led the Europeans into conducting the fascist salute, returning to the Roman salute of raising their arms up in the air as a greeting to avoid shaking hands with each other so that they couldn't catch germs. The same logic that led to Asians to bow to prevent them from catching germs from each other with the pressing of the flesh. All of this impacted the world tremendously, and Emperor Hirohito ultimately won the Second World War on his ability to deliver biocidals and the threat that presented to your United States government, which forced Harry Truman into suing for peace, dismantling the Department of War, and creating the Department of Defense, which I ultimately worked for. So all of this came from a short story on the proposition for genocide of the Chinese people written by Jack London, who is native to the Greater Bay Area of San Francisco and Oakland and this entire region. So we've got this source point for that. And it is, of course, where we had potentially other world-changing events that might have to do with myself in government eyes. This is why they don't buy me out, even though they can't infiltrate the community that I work with. The community I work with is similar to, let's give you another analogy. They can't infiltrate the Asian Pacific Islander American community no matter how hard they try, because it's very easy to spot somebody who's Americanized. Everybody can tell a sellout in this community. You got the sellouts like George Takei, the Japanese house nigger known as Michio Kaku, who goes out all over the world telling people how great democracies are and all this crap when he lives in, of course, a military junta. And, of course, democracies aren't great for jack shit because democracies are mobocracies. And he gets out there promoting democracies as a propagandist. How the hell does a physicist who designs nuclear weapons know anything about politics? Now, that's funny, but this guy's out there telling you how smart he is, and you think he's a political genius. Just like you think Donald Trump is an economic genius because he leapfrogs ahead of his creditors by declaring bankruptcy. That's how effed you are in the head by your government. Now, all these turncoats, these race traders, are spotted in the Asian community. They're instantly fingered. They're instantly ostracized. And the only thing they can do is go out and propagandize white people like you, or black people like you, and tell you how great democracy is, and tell you about how great they love this country, even though they were institutionalized in internment camps like George Takei. Or you got out-and-out race traders like David Fry, who is a Jap American who wound up being used to infiltrate the militia movement up in Oregon, where Amanda Yu and, of course, Mona Lee McCrae live. And this guy got them all entrapped into a situation under siege where they all walked into prison while he walked free. And he became a government agent on the basis of being busted for drugs in his past. Then you've got guys like, of course, Lon Horiuchi, who works for the FBI as their favorite hitman, who took out women and children at Ruby Ridge. These are all these false friend Asian Pacific Islander Americans. I'm an honest enemy. You can trust me. You know where I'm coming from. You can't trust them for shit because you know where they're coming from too. U.S. government shills. Now, none of them are in the deep Asian underground economy of the left coast. I am. Now, it's similar to the Vietnam War. During the time of the Vietnam War, you had the largest population in the world of Americans outside of the United States relocated to Vietnam. So big in terms of their numbers and their demographic in relocation to Vietnam at the height of the Second Indochina conflict, the Second Indochina War, that they had their own military currency. Don't take my word for it. Look it up. Any numismatics collector, a collector of money, will tell you that there are military banknotes, military dollars that were issued in Vietnam that had on the head, instead of George Washington, a USGI, and on the back, if you flipped it over, it was a B-29 stratospheric bomber. I mean, this is the kind of monies that were issued amongst other bills and coins that were the currency officially of the military economy of the overseas military establishment in Vietnam, which was enormous. Beyond that, you had, of course, a lot of these guys who were fragging their officers, which is how they wound up in prison. So there were so many people in prison at LBJ. Everybody called it LBJ. Civilians think that was an acronym for Lyndon Baines Johnson. But no, the jail wasn't named after him. It was Long Binh Jail. Long Binh Jail was a military brig in Vietnam where you had the largest prison riots in American history. These were the largest race riots that ever occurred in American penal or penitentiary history. And they didn't occur here. They beat out Attica and they beat out everything, all the shit. They occurred over at Long Binh Jail, LBJ in Vietnam. That's how many men you had stationed overseas. There were more men in prison over there than you had in the United States over here. So this was a situation in which you had all these men and hella deserters, plenty of deserters. And all of these deserters would form an underground community in the black market. This was known as the Khaki Mafia. The Khaki Mafia, of course, was the military mafia of people who were not deserters, and they were dealing with the deserters who were able to get them weapons, such as AK-47s, and sell it to them so they could put that on their own market and all other things that they wanted from in-area Vietnam. Now, what was the mafia that was the underground economy? That was the deserters? The Black Mafia. The overwhelming majority of deserters in Vietnam were black, and the MPs or the military police couldn't infiltrate them for shit because they couldn't get a guy who was a military policeman who could put on blackface and accomplish a black accent that was effective enough to not get him killed as soon as he entered one of these black mafia communities. What happened would be the black deserters, when they deserted, would pick up Vietnamese language manuals. They'd learn Vietnamese. They would learn to bow, learn to respect the local culture. The Vietnamese community would take them in. They'd set up an enterprise. They'd work with other black guys who were deserters. You had a whole black mafia economy going on in Vietnam. And it was a lot similar to these free towns that developed in the gray area of the Deep South and in Brazil of escaped African slaves. Now, none of this was infiltratable or penetrable by the military intelligence complex of the United States Army because everyone they hire is white. Well, it's the same with the communities I work with. We're impenetrable in that sense. And because of that, I have to stay among them. And that is what keeps me safe. Either they kill us all, like Jack London was proposing, or they tolerate it. To give you an example of this, the Cho community. When I bring up the Cho, everybody says, oh, come on, man. Asian pygmies that are known as malevolent fae or fairy in the Asian community. What is all this? Well, they operate openly and in your face. Cho Chocolate was headquartered in San Francisco, still is administratively, but its main facilities are in Oakland, where the rent is astronomically cheaper. And Cho Chocolate, Cho is the Tibetan word for black magician. My medical cosmetologist, V, did the hair for the wife of the Cho community chocolate manufacturing business. And this woman is white. She's Caucasian. The particular Cho who married her was wealthy enough to marry a Caucasian or a European American woman. The man was nowhere to be seen. V had never, ever seen him. She broke off professional contact with this individual for any number of reasons. But the fact is that this community is such that it obviously exists. And it exists to the point where they're operating openly in business under their own name. But when I brought in a Cho speaker, Cho is a recognized language anthropologically and linguistically. Don't take my word for it, vet it, look it up yourself. And when I brought in a Cho speaker, because I knew a woman whose husband spoke the dialect, he was not an ethnic Cho himself, but he was one of the few people in the world outside of that ethnic community who spoke their dialect. The San Francisco Police Department said we can't take an interpreter or employ an interpreter in Cho because the alphabet people, meaning the NSA, the CIA, FBI, say they don't exist. They officially don't exist. And so because of that, the Cho community operates with impunity because they're a government asset as a population base. These are the same Cho that I told you about that interfere in your dreams at night, create sleep disturbances, much of the old hag experiences that Americans are experiencing. But of course, a propagandist who wrote Communion and all that other shit, Whitley Strieber, had to tell you they're little gray aliens. So you think you're being victimized by people from outer space, as opposed to an Asian emigre community shipped over en masse, 40,000 of them throughout North America and the United States and Canada, just as they shipped 100,000 Hmong tribesmen or Cambodians into San Francisco, in particular, as the main distribution center before they basically distributed throughout the majority of the left coast in the United States and Canada again. So we have a situation here in which you have communities that are, in a sense, immune. You have entire communities that are immune to prosecution no matter what crimes they commit. You have other communities that are simply impenetrable. And as a result, this is the only place in the world where I can thrive or survive until ultimately, hopefully, I can move out. Now, the question might be, well, why can't the government just move you out? Now, I brought this up on air before. Why not give me some money to get the hell out of the United States? If you don't want me here, why don't you just give me money and I will gladly move? Now, you've got people out there who are stranded. They don't want to be there, like Richard Snowden. Now, Snowden obviously doesn't know shit. If Snowden knew shit, if he had really stolen everything, like the NSA say, National Security Agency, that's Aquino's agency. It's run, of course, by Admiral Billy Joe Red McCombs, or that was the millionaire who works with him. Oh, God, I forget the guy who's in charge of that. But he's the same boss, of course, that owns Clear Channel, which provides you, of course, Premier Radio Network's program of Coast to Coast AM. And, of course, they've nationally syndicated the doofus, Mr. Toxic Avenger himself, Clyde Lewis, on his Ground Zero program. And, of course, he's a practicing Satanist. And with George Norrie, he was a former naval intelligence officer who specialized in spin doctoring. And he was a individual who obviously would turn negative situations into positive situations to spin the situation for the public whenever some disaster occurred in the U.S. Navy. So when we've got a, let me see, the co-founder for Coast to Coast AM, I'm going to look him up right now. And the co-founder for that was Billy Joe Red McCombs. He's a business tycoon. He was named one of Forbes magazine's top 400 richest Americans back in 2005, the last time I checked. And he's the chairman of the board for Clear Channel. The board also includes the former Federal Reservist and National Security Agency Director, Admiral Bobby Ray Inman. Admiral Bobby Ray Inman was an interdepartmental intelligence liaison specialist. He was in the United States Navy from 1951 to 1982, the same years that George Norrie was in. He was the chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas from 1987 to 1990. The majority of his resume is entirely classified. And it's Admiral Bobby Ray Inman, retired, who is the same boss for both Michael Aquino, who's a deputy director in his agency, and George Norrie, who, of course, receives his orders as to what to talk about on Coast to Coast AM. So you're entirely propagandized by all of these people, the same people who tried to co-opt all of the information that I've leaked by stealing my persona and giving it to Stephen Outram, this New Zealander who's as foreign as I am, but they think that you're going to love his ass because he's white. and has a accent that they think sounds sexy. While they don't tell you, of course, that he was sued in court by his ex-girlfriend who testified in court that he has performance issues, smells horrible, doesn't take care of his hygiene, and has multiple other issues such as drinking, etc., and maybe headed towards type 2 diabetes, all the rest of that stuff. So, all of this that they push down your throat, why don't they just push me out? Snowden, of course, is in Russia involuntarily. And he doesn't know anything, because if he knew anything, he's been in Russia where they would have interrogated him half to death by this point. And the guy has said nothing which the Russians have exposed are unleashed on the world like I do. One of my survival techniques is to leak information piecemeal. You can't give everything out at once. Nobody would believe it all at once anyway. The story is just too complicated for them to comprehend out of context. So you have to contextualize all that you release, which is what I've done as a strategy, originally through the Government Accountability Project, and I've kept it up ever since. That is the main exposition that, of course, Stephen Outram is working for the government. If he is releasing any of this information to you as a multimillionaire Silicon Valley secret weapon, how come he's never gone through the Government Accountability Project as a whistleblower? Well, because even he himself will tell you he's not a whistleblower. He's just regurgitating information already leaked by myself. Only he says, you can't believe it because I originally was destroying this information. Well, if I weren't destroying this information as a documents destruction expert and leaking it, Stephen Outram never would have had the information to talk about or regurgitate verbatim. So he defeats his own argument in his stupidity. That's government think. It's the same government think that doesn't have them buy me out. Now, again, comparison. Snowden's case, he's stuck in Russia. He's worthless because if he had anything, the Russians would have leaked something. Instead, they use him to pump Donald Trump. He came up as, of course, John Miranda will testify, with a pro-Trump statement saying, anyone other than Trump is bad. Basically, pushing the Putin line because Putin wants Trump in charge because he knows Trump will never confront him. And because of that, everybody in Russia very much wants Trump to be your president because they're propagandized by the Putinista regime party line. So all of these people want you to have Trump as president. Now ask yourself, is that good for you that Russia wants you to have Trump for president? Well, I say this to you. If you want to live as Russians do, move to Russia and you'll find out how life is like under the Putinista regime. And then ask yourself, is that how I want to live under a Trump regime? That's what you'll get, is a robber baron in charge. Vladimir Putin is one of the richest men in the world. He's the second most richest man in the world on the open rich sourcing market, meaning those that are publicly listed. The extremely wealthy, the Rothschilds, the old school riche, the ancien regime, they pay to be unlisted. They don't make it to Forbes 500 top wealthiest people. Okay? Those who don't make that payment, the nouveau riche, are like Bill Gates. Bill Gates was many years, number one. Number two, Vladimir Putin, because he nationalized all of Russia's gas, all of natural resources, all of its services, and made them his money. So he's basically wealthy off his nation's money. He's not sharing that well. So most of the people who are in Russia live at a level that you would consider hellish. If you want to live like that, then you obey the dictates of Richard Snowden. Because Dick Snowden tells you, we want Trump as president. Trump is a good president. And he pushes this pro-Trump thing because he's got Putin's gun at the back of his head. But has any information been released? Have you found out anything new from Snowden? Nothing. And that's because Edward Snowden, thank you. Appreciate that from my executive producer. As far as I'm concerned, he's just no job. Has got nothing to share. He's got nothing of substance. Or it would have been leaked. And the Russians would be on top of the world. But there's nothing there. There's nothing coming out. So instead of a piecemeal leakage like I do, he's got nothing to say. But in my case, why don't they just get rid of me and say, hey, Douglas Dietrich, we'll give you all this money. Say, for instance, Stephen Outram. He was desperate to buy all of my presentations. He approached Lori and Advent. We got the screenshot that proves that irrevocably. He's damned to hell and back forever. It's just, he's abortion. He's an abortion. He's abortive. He never even got started because everyone knows he contacted Lori and Advent to get everything I had. She gave it to him under the table ultimately, obviously paid her off. Why couldn't he have just approached me and given me that money? Why couldn't he have just sponsored me? Because he didn't want me to be credited it. He wanted to take it all and be Douglas Dietrich. He wanted to be the new weapon of mass destruction. He wanted to be James Bond. He wanted to be the new shadow historian. Now, that's all his personal pathology. That's his problem. Because no matter how much money he's got, he can never be me. So he wanted that because he thinks that's glamorous. Now, on the other hand, the government, why don't they push me out? Because they're worried about what would happen if I went to China. Basically, you had an American, say, for instance, in one of the presidents of Taiwan, the Nationalist Republic of China, that is, of course, resettled on the islands of Taiwan. One of their presidents, who ultimately went to jail, was an American. He was a recent president. And this individual spoke perfect English. He was a United States citizen. And he basically went over to Taiwan and said, I want to be your president. And they said, well, this guy's a United States citizen. He's someone who is obviously familiar with the economy and the lifestyle there. And so let's make him president. I believe that was Ma Ying-jeou. I might be wrong about that. It could have been Chen Shui-bian. But he was definitely right after Li Dinghui, who had been there forever. And so I think it was Chen Shui-bian. So Chen Shui-bian had the 10th and 11th terms. I believe he's the guy who's in jail now. And he was someone who wound up stealing a bunch of money from Taiwan. Yes, he was followed by Mao Ying-jeou, who was the former mayor of the capital city of Taipei, in which I was born. So in terms of the president that I'm thinking of, it is definitely Chen Shui-bian. And Chen Shui-bian, as an American, went over to Taiwan, became president of that nation, ultimately wound up in jail for stealing all kinds of money from their federal assets, and was identified ultimately as an American shill, an American attempt to take over the Nationalist Republic of China. So he got his just desserts. But what they're afraid of is that if I go back, that I would be the key to the reunification of the two Chinas, and that I would become a force in Chinese politics. The reason why is because China is no longer China. China is no longer ethnically Chinese. Because of the one-child policy, the biggest challenge in China today is the crash and collapse of its population and its demographic ability to maintain its power in the world. First off, the overwhelming majority of people in China who are born for many decades now have been boys. They have no one to screw other than other boys. This is why they clamp down on homosexuality as totally illegal. That's why it's a crime to be homosexual. They're afraid of everyone turning into a big butt rump orgy like South Park, where they're all lined up for miles screwing each other in a daisy chain. So to prevent that, they declared a crime, and they declared a disease to be treated in incarceration. This is why they tie men up who are declared homosexual. They tie literally electrodes to their testicles. They feed them homosexual porn, and every time they get an erection, they fry them to the point where the testicles are fried off and they can't get it up anymore, and then they're declared cured. Okay, why are they so desperate? They're that desperate because there's no one else to screw other than other men in China. So the biggest smuggling problem in China and abduction problem is, of course, the trade in women. There's 40 million women missing in China. I mean, 40 million women have been abducted. Every constabulary, every police department in China is aware of this and has to contend with this problem on a daily basis because men are abducting brides. They have no one to marry. So women get abducted. So what the government does is it tolerates the gang trade. And the gang trade, the big trade in China, is not drugs. It's not arms. It's not munitions. It's not anything you would think of in the United States or anywhere else in the world. It's women. And they're being abducted and sold into China by the millions. They come out of Vietnam. They come out of Indonesia. They come out of Russia. They come out of every neighboring area to China. So what is going to happen as more and more of the children produced by these foreign brides become the demographic baseline of China? They're all like me. China is no longer Chinese. The overwhelming majority of women who are still ethnic Chinese in China are as good as gold. They are literally worth their weight in gold and more. They can ask for anything they want and they can get it, because that is what every man who succeeds in China economically wants, is an ethnic Chinese bride so that he can produce ethnic Chinese children. So what we are going to have is ultimately an upper caste or a middle class of China, which is ethnically Chinese, and the rest of China will be a swarm, people who are half Burmese, half Thai, incredibly synthesized as a pan-Asian culture. Now, they are afraid that I can go there and mobilize these people in a manner that would ultimately change the world you live in. Otherwise, they could support myself and say, hey, you know what? China is on its way out with the Communist Party. They've lost the mandate of heaven. These are all old men from the revolution on respirators. They are sitting in the Politburo of China, and one pissed off general could kill off the entire Chinese communist leadership in 20 minutes. So they say, well, who would we rather have? The pissed off general or someone like Douglas Dietrich going over there and creating a new society out of all of these composite cosmopolitan people that are the new race that is forming on the face of the earth? Obviously, they find myself far more of a threat than the pissed off general. The last thing they want is for me to go back to Asia. That's why there's been no movements to buy me out and say, Douglas Dietrich, get out of here, go back to Asia. Because of the threat that that represents to their concept of the world as you know it. Now, that world's going to change at any rate. But the point is, I am stranded here without the ability for them to buy me out. They don't consider that an option. So that's why they've attempted to take me out. And that's why they've attempted to instead buy me out, steal my identity through Stephen Outram. So that is the horror of the situation that I live in. In terms of the positives, keep in mind that I am very much a sexaholic, and there is no other place where I could get away with the lifestyle that I live with professional escorts as I would in San Francisco. I can't simply move into a small town. I cannot do anything in even a small city to the extent that I get away with what I get away with here. I can go to parties here and pick up chicks, where I can't do that in smaller environments. And we have a cosmopolitan enough environment where I can keep up that lifestyle and maintain it through my underground connections with the underground economy. And that is why I'm anchored here. That's why I'm tethered here. It's a lot more complicated and convoluted and invisible than the tethers that bind Amanda Ute to Oregon, but it's far more strong because of that. I am strongly anchored in this area of the world at this moment of existence. So that is basically the situation behind that. Of course, when we come into the situation of the illustrations that I produce, brought up by Kerry Sekviar, and shout out to him again, we have a situation which is, again, very nuanced. What we have is my original talent for illustration when I was young, we're talking about 14, 15 years of age, is when I began to illustrate for pornographic comics, because the major industry in San Francisco is pornography. I've talked about this before, even to the point of the bondage films being filmed at the Armory, where so many of the people you see in those films who are the men, as opposed to the pornographic actresses, who are, of course, always the real star of any pornographic piece, are off-duty cops. And most people think of the Armory as the place where the police go to basically train in martial arts. Yeah, they're training all right, but the martial art that they're applying has nothing to do with what you're thinking of in terms of self-defense. But again, very important to emphasize, these are off-duty cops. This is a whole production facility that is involved not directly with any administration with police responsibilities, but happens to be a side product of, shall we say, availability of bondage items, as it is available to many cops. in terms of handcuffs, tasers, batons, etc., that are used as props in these various pornographic films. It's just one of those things where the industry has accommodated a service, shall we say, personnel from a legitimate part of the civil infrastructure, and it's managed to work out as part of the underground economy of San Francisco. Again, something that no one could get away with anywhere else. So in terms of this environment in which I exist, we've got this pornographic industry where when I was very young, it was the only way to bring in a lot of money at once for my family, which was at the absolute bottom level of poverty in the world, as far as I'm concerned. And when I got involved with that, with illustration, what I find interesting is that people like Alex Merklinger attack myself for that, especially on YouTube. And these people who bring that up saying, oh, Douglas Dee was a pornographic illustrator, I've never hidden that because there's nothing to be ashamed of. I was illustrating pornography before I was of legal age to buy it. And what's interesting to me is they try to pervert this and say he was illustrating child pornography. Now, I brought up before how I got my high school teacher, Gary Willard Hambright, busted. Gary Willard Hambright, of course, maintained a huge child pornography collection on-site John O'Connell Vocational Institute, which has since been demolished and a new one built at the other end of the city. The John O'Connell Vocational Institute today is not the same one that used to be at Treat and Bryant Street, Harrison Street out there in the Mission District, which was, of course, entirely demolished to hide all evidence. But I got him busted for maintaining a child pornography collection on-site San Francisco Unified School District property, SFUSD property. That was not what he was busted for. What he was not busted for at the time was, because the U.S. government would do nothing about it, was molesting all kinds of kids at the child daycare center. Now, at Presidio Military Base, where he was a manager at the Presidio Military Base of the child daycare center, the CDC. Now, he was ultimately convicted for that. He was federally indicted by on 14 counts. He would have been indicted for hundreds more had he survived, but he died of AIDS during the trial. But while he was alive, he was indicted on 14 counts of child assaults against children, all of them which were under 4 years of age. And the only person in the world who has ever defended him has been Michael Aquino. And Michael Aquino will defend him adamantly because they had some kind of binding together. The children who identified Mr. Gary are Gary Willard Hambright, the Southern Baptist minister without a pulpit, who taught myself pornographic illustration at the John O'Connell Vocational Institute. This was an individual who was identified by children at the home of Michael Aquino. They said he was at the residence, which they identified on drive-bys with the FBI. They identified exactly where that residence was. They said there was a black room inside of the home of Michael Aquino. They said that they were molested by a man named Mr. Gary, and they described him as Gary Willard Hambright. And they said they were molested by a guy named Mikey, who they described as Michael Aquino. Now, strangely enough, Michael Aquino is the only guy who defends Gary Willard Hambright. Obviously, for some reason, there was some kind of bind there. He could easily have scapegoated him and pushed all attention on him and kept himself out of trouble. I have no idea why, but obviously they were bonded in a far deeper binding than is visible to any of us, based on something in which Michael Aquino feels obligated to continue to defend Gary Willard Hambright even after federal indictment and Gary Willard Hambright's death. But we've got a situation that is obviously stinks to high heaven. When Inspector Pamfloff raided Michael Aquino's home, the black room was indeed identified as described by the children. Of course, Michael Aquino got off because of national security reasons. This is what national security gets you. See, you're paying for all this national security. That's what it gets you. National security reasons gets Michael Aquino off. So all of this is a situation which is taking place in which I was producing pornographic illustrations. And when I produced this art, and ultimately the whole scandal went down when I got Presidio Military Base ultimately shut down because of all of this, and generated tens of thousands of enemies because 24,000 people lost their jobs. The families they supported had no more income being generated by the providers. And of course, a lot of people, of course, sent me death threats who were involved with the Presidio Military Base for the rest of my life. So in that situation, my mother, of course, made me swear unto her that I would never, ever produce illustrations again for profit. So I don't mind that my illustrations circulate out there. I never credit them. As a foreign pornographer, I never sign my illustrations except in very exceptional circumstances when I'm personalizing something. But for the most part, when the illustrations are out there, no one needs to trip and no one needs to basically feel that there's some kind of copyright infringement. I am just gratified that the art is being circulated. And most certainly, I am someone who is just gratified to have the talent. I would never, ever again on my mother's grave employ my art or prostitute it or employ it for profit. So with all of that in my background, contextualize. Hopefully everyone has a better understanding of my art, my situation, and of course, why I am where I am. And therefore that can put at rest the attacks of Alex Merklinger under his YouTube name that he goes by. And just let me read that out again so people know who to be looking for. Alex Merklinger is operational under the YouTube avatar of all lowercase letters, R Beck 3200 TB40. That's RBECK 3200 TB40. And it is most definitely Alex Merklinger. And yes, he's definitely under a witness protection program, protected for his crimes. And that's one thing you'll notice about all these people that the government works with. They're all compromised. Lori Ann Fenton has never paid federal income taxes a day in her life. Alex Merklinger is busted for selling Pearl Harbor to the United States Navy for $39 million. I could go on and on with examples, but the only people your government feels comfortable working with are criminals. So you have a kleptocracy. It's a criminal government. It's very similar to what you have in Russia. Vladimir Putin is a patriot, but he is no less the gangster for it. He is a former KGB agent. The KGB, of course, ran as many drugs and narcotics and